Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah Martin with The Contoured Chemist. All right guys, I'm back today with another giveaway for December. And today, you could probably guess what the giveaway is because I am talking all about brushes. All of the 3D brushes from Seint. So, I was just chatting with somebody in my DMs this morning when they're asking me questions about brushes, and I'm like, I'm literally getting ready to film exactly what you need. So today is all about every single brush, the best ways to use them. I'm gonna show you all of them, that if you feel lost on what to use where and how and why and all of the things, I got you. We're gonna talk about that today. So if you wanna check it out and see what the giveaway is, hint, hint, keep watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching. All right, friends. So if you cannot guess what the giveaway is for this video, let me give you a little hint. Okay, all of them, okay, from 3D, okay, we're not talking about Demi, just the 3D brushes. There are 10 total brushes that we have. You're gonna get all of them, okay? So that is the giveaway for this video. Be sure you are following. Comment below if you want to be entered. I will pick the winner based on the comments below. Make sure you are paying attention to the replies to your comment. By the end of December, I am picking winners for all of my 12 days of giveaways here and over on Instagram and Facebook. So the only way I can contact you is by commenting below your comment if you win. So make sure you're checking back, or at least replying to me when I tell you you've won so you can get your goodies. Okay, let's get into it, shall we? Y'all know how I can talk a while about each brush. If you don't know, I've done this video before, but it has been a long time. And as you guys know, I am always experimenting with brushes. And I'm pretty sure the last time I did this video, one of these brushes was brand new and I wasn't a fan of it yet. And I only used it for one thing. And now it's actually one of my favorite brushes to use for something else. So never stop experimenting with how you're using these brushes. So right off the bat, this is not the one all be all of how to use these brushes, all right? Like I just said, you have to experiment. Find out what works best for you. This is based on my 4 years of experimenting with this makeup, with the creams, with each brush, feedback from my clients from certain brushes based on issues that they have with them or the type of coverage. There are so many different factors, and I feel like makeup is such a personal thing and it's your personal preference, okay? So I'm just gonna preface that saying that just because I might not use a brush a certain way does not mean if you like to use it that way, go for it, okay? There are no rules, no rules. I'm going to try to show you how to use each brush because I can explain, but there's nothing about actually seeing it in motion. And I'm always saying the motion of the brush and how you use it is like, can be the difference of night and day when it comes to liking it or not. Because there are different ways to apply this makeup and you might just be using it a little bit differently. And maybe that's why you might be having issues with a certain brush. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of try to show you without taking forever to do my full face and being able to kind of show you the multitude of ways I've used these brushes to see if maybe there's a way that you haven't tried before, that maybe it will be your new favorite. Okay, so let's get started. Now, you will notice that my favorite tool, at least the one I always say I can't do my makeup without, is not included in the brush set, and I'm thinking I probably should have, and that is the Perfector. Mine's sitting here drying out so that I can actually do my makeup, but I am giving that away in I know at least 2 other bundles. So I forgot it, but it is absolutely vital with this makeup, in my opinion, for how I like to wear my makeup. Okay, so I don't want you guys to think that I'm not using it, because I always am. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and act like I'm starting my face, and I'm gonna go through each face brush and ones that I used to not qualify as face brush. But let's see, I'm gonna go over every brush that I use on the face. So I consider all of these brushes to be good for the face for different purposes. But when I say face, most people are thinking, okay, that is what I'm gonna use to apply the highlights and contour part of the foundation, the part of 3D foundation that we all know and love, right? Okay, so first things first, I use a color corrector. If you're brand new here, you might not understand. I would say go watch last week's video if you just want to know the basics of what to start with. That was showing you 2 brushes only. This is going to be for my more advanced girls who either have a lot of brushes already or are looking to add to their collection but don't quite know which one to pick up next, or if you just kind of want to learn different ways to use the brushes you already have. So for color correction, I always say number 1 thing is to use very little, okay? A little goes a long way, because usually a color corrector should be darker than your darkest points on your face, or at least match them. And it usually has different undertones than, I'd say 99% of people don't have the exact undertones of the color corrector, which is why they need a main shade to kind of bring it back to matching. So applying too much of your color corrector can pull off your entire color. If you're applying too much, it can make you look too warm, too orange, too dark, all of these things, and it will throw off your match if it's not applied in the right amount. So this is why I always say you can like tap in and just dot it and then pick up your brush and buff it out, okay? But the key is a brush that buffs, okay? When I say buffing motion, I mean small little circles, okay? This is not buffing, okay? This is swiping, okay? Even if you're not just doing this, like this is not a motion you need to use with this makeup, because it will actually just cause the makeup to streak along your skin. It's not really distributing it evenly and getting it to, I don't want to say into the skin, because probably no, this makeup does not get absorbed in the skin. It does not. Creams do sit on top of the skin, but in order for it to kind of melt into your skin and really almost give the appearance that you're not wearing anything, you really have to get the smallest amount possible and allow it to be evenly dispersed. I don't know if I'm explaining correctly, but this is why the buffing motion is crucial, and not all brushes will buff. Okay, my first pick is always the blush bronzer brush, because this brush, even though it was originally designed for blush, is one of the softest brushes we have. And it's something about the, almost like that dome distribution of bristles. It is, of course, dense enough for creams. All of our brushes are designed for creams, which is why they work completely differently than most brushes on the market, because most brushes on the market are made for either liquids or powders. They're not designed for this type of a formulation in the least. So this something about this brush, I'll be honest. It's pretty magical. Like, it is really soft, whereas you might be like, oh, it's just like this brush. But this one is so much more dense. And if you can see the difference in the way they're distributed, this is much denser than this. This almost has like a cushion to it, whereas this does not, okay? So I find a lot of people, this is the 3D brush. A lot of people start with this brush. I find a lot of people that use this brush end up using too much product, even if they're using this end for highlight. Now, you can use this side of the brush for the same motion, but for mature skin, I highly recommend picking up this brush instead. I find that with mature skin, a lot of times when you're buffing, you can be moving the skin really easily because we lose elasticity as we age. And you almost need that softness to really, I don't want to say, like, wish you guys could see the difference. I'm just gently buffing, and do you see my skin moving there versus here? Like, I mean, yeah, it still moves because I have a lot of loose skin there. But this brush, especially even the pouncing motion, it's hard to describe unless you're feeling it. This one also is more to a point. So like when you are pressing on, really the only part of the brush that's actually doing anything is right here. So it covers much less surface area than this brush, which as you're pressing, again, like I said, it has give. So it's like covering this entire area, whereas this one is just like the very tip of it. This brush can do the same thing, but I find this one takes me twice as long as this one does. And this one just does not give the same airbrush look. So if that's what you're going for, I would say grab this brush for your color corrector, and you can also use it for your main shade. I'll get there. But the most, I'd say, similar would be the technically contour end of the 3D brush, okay? So that would be, I mean, you can tell just by looking down at the bristles, the difference in density, okay? So one of the funniest things I feel like to me is when they renamed all of our brushes when we changed our name from Mascara Beauty to Seint, was that this was called the Buffy brush, and then they called it the Buff, okay? Which you would think, I'm saying, oh, buff it into the skin, that this would be a really good brush for that. Do you see how much this one will move your face? Okay? It's funny to me because it's called the Buff brush, but this brush I do not recommend to buff in any way, shape, or form. That is not the motion I would ever use this brush. And the reason why is because it is the most dense brush we have. Meaning when you're buffing it, do you see that? It literally moves everything, including your skin. It just doesn't go on smoothly, in my opinion, during this, for this motion at all. I will show you how I recommend using it, but it is not this motion, okay, which is the buffing motion. So this also picks up probably the most amount of product of every brush we have, which I just said the color corrector, you want the least amount. So this one will give you way too heavy hand, and I promise you will not be totally matching the way, if I matched you the way I intended, because you'll be way over applying your color corrector. So hold off on this one. Now, this is the brush I used when I first started with this makeup for my full face. This is the detail brush. And you guys know I'm ride or die when it comes to contour. But I put on my full face with this end of the brush. Okay. Now, for this step, it actually isn't a bad idea. Okay. This brush, even though it's kind of a weird shape, actually buffs over the skin really nicely. I always say this brush can actually give a very natural finish, but I don't recommend it to press on over, like if you're using a color corrector and you're trying to use this brush for your whole face. I wouldn't recommend it because this brush does not press on very evenly at all. It almost is kind of pokey when you're using it this way, but it's soft when you're in the buffing motion. So for your color corrector, absolutely. You could easily, I probably wouldn't dip directly into with this brush because it's gonna pick up probably way too much. It's kind of a large brush, but I would say tap in with your finger and dot it. I don't know why I'm not like showing you guys. Tap in with your finger and dot it, okay? And let it warm up. I said I was doing my face and then I didn't. I didn't do what I said. Okay, so once it kind of is warmed up, then this brush actually buffs it in and distributes it really well, really easily, really thinly. So this is a good brush to use for your color correcting stuff. Okay, I'll save that one for last. Okay, this brush is for powder. So this is the powder brush. This end I always use for my powder. I'll show you that in a minute. This end, if you try to use it for highlight, is very similar to the buff brush. It's very dense. I don't recommend this at all for light hand. Now, I've seen some people use this brush. This end is always kind of like the one I always get questions about, where people are like, okay, use this for powder, but what do you use the other end for? Okay, it's a more kabuki style brush. That's why it's like at that angle. It's pretty wide though. It's really kind of too wide for contour in my opinion. This brush actually was originally designed for blush. Okay, so if you don't have this brush, say you are trying to do your full face with maybe, and you just like to powder, I don't know, you could use this end for your blush. I do feel like this presses on presses on blush really well. I don't feel like it's the best. It's not bad, but if I look really close, I still have exactly where I touched my face. It did not distribute it very well from that area. So it's really soft, and I feel like it's a little bit too soft maybe to evenly buff that out, okay? All right, last but not least, the brush that I'm gonna give a little love to because I'm pretty sure in my last one, I did not. So the reason why, hear me out, okay? This brush is originally designed for powder illuminator, okay? Right here, okay? This is the blend brush, okay? It literally, when it came out, released with our powder illuminators when they came out for the very first time, you can tell this is the loosest fiber brush we have by far, and that's because it was designed for powders, which don't need that density that creams need, okay? So I kind of just was like, well, I'm just gonna use it for the powder. I'm never gonna use it for anything else. And then when Demi was starting to come out, this was the brush that they were experimenting with Demi before it got released to customers. And so you see a lot of artists trying to use this with 3D in the same way, which is how people discovered how well this brush is for the lightest application possible with this makeup. And again, it's because it doesn't pick up much product. Because it's so loose, you can easily kind of just tap in, and it doesn't, I'd say, buff in the same way that something like this would, which is dense, but you can use it and just kind of use the very tip of this brush, and it almost is like, it's super soft. It's almost just like feather motions. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a feather duster, okay? You're just barely kind of distributing the product. For what I just did, again, it's not very dense. It's gonna be harder for me to buff this out. I'm gonna have to use a little bit more pressure than if I was to just do this and kind of tap, tap, just get a little bit, say on the, now I don't have anywhere to put it, on the end of my brush, and then just kind of evenly distribute it where I need it. Okay, so this brush is the best. If you have tried this with your color corrector and you still apply too much of your corrector and you need help keeping a very light hand, pick up this brush, okay? I love it now more so because like for the longest time I'm like, yeah, but I can't really like get these areas around my nose and all this, but now I've really realized that it's just all in how I'm using it, and I use this other end as well for those smaller areas. And it's becoming one of my favorite brushes for that detail correction. Because obviously this brush has always been my ride or die, but it doesn't get in those little nooks and crannies like this one can. Okay, I'm going to buff this one. This one's still, I would say, if you're gonna do the putting a spot on, letting it warm up, this one will still distribute it better than any other brush. Or if you have mature skin, I would say stick with this one. Okay, so my next step is always correcting my under eyes, dark spots, blemishes, all of those things. And so those can kind of vary, and those are also something that I feel like under eyes especially take a lot of trial and error, and you kind of got to try multiple methods. But you guys know I always use my fingers. I still love that for around the eye, but like I just said, I've been using this brush more and more. Now, this end, okay, is nice and small and can really kind of get in to those small areas well. Very, very similar to the small end of the detail brush. Now, they're just slightly differently shaped, but really it's not so much of a difference that I think anyone would really notice. I'd say this one's a little bit more pointed. This one's a little fluffier, okay? Both of these can be used interchangeably for any detailed work, okay? So you'll see when I do contour under the lip, contouring the nose, and both of them are really good for evening out the eyelids, or even using them if you're gonna use lip and cheek or contour as shadow. I would say these brushes are two of my favorites because they are more of that design for creams. They're a little denser than our eyeshadow brushes, which are designed for powders, okay? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and use one on each side so you can see that there's very little difference. Now I'm kind of trying to like not move that delicate skin around as much as possible. So I'm kind of using, again, buffing motion, just very small buffing motion so that I get the thinnest possible layer of color corrector I can around my eyes, okay? And then when it comes to the eyelids, I can sweep more. I have already primed my eyes. If you're not like me and you don't like to use your finger for priming your eyes, I would say one of my favorite brushes for like a cream eyeshadow primer or even a pot type is the Multitasker. And so you can easily kind of get all the way down to the lash line and prime your eye. I'm just used to using my fingers, but that is not the only way to do it. Okay, I'm gonna switch to the detail brush and do the same thing. Okay, so both of these brushes are really good to get in here around the broken capillaries. And obviously, if you have hyperpigmentation like I do, to kind of press it on anywhere you need more coverage. You could also press it more so under the eye, anywhere you want to build up coverage. Now, the thing with hyperpigmentation is obviously it can be different in size, right? So I always say kind of match the brush to the size of the spot you're covering. So if it's larger than this end, it would take longer to cover, okay? You can always use a larger brush to press it on, but with that, you always see, we already buffed on our thin layer of coverage. We're at the pressing on stage to build up coverage. So any brush you choose, you want it to be more of a pressing motion than the buffing motion at this point. So my favorite brush for blemishes is by far the Multitasker. In fact, I like to have 3 multitaskers. And I feel like this is the most underrated brush of all of our brushes because people don't talk about how awesome it is, but it truly is the one brush that can do every part of your face. Okay, so I have one for the face. That is going to be for blemishes, spots, mostly blemishes. You want to keep that brush nice and small. So it's got this tiny end, but then you can flip it around and actually use it to press on more on a larger area or to press on that powder and get it just on that blemish so you don't have that like dry look around the blemish. You guys know what I'm talking about as it's healing. But that way you can pinpoint the powder to set it as well. So that is for the face. I also use, you can tell this one is for my lips, okay? I'm always lining my lips with my contour. I use both ends for liner. It just kind of depends on my mood. And then I use it to fill in my lip and cheeks for lip color as well. And then also, this one's the old one, for my eyes, okay? So this end actually can be used for everything for brows, okay? You can use it for eyeliner. I use this end for eyeliner as well, a lot of times with shadow, and I also use it for eyeshadow. So this is my favorite brush to actually press on shades so they have the most pigmentation, most color payoff, most shimmery. If I'm ever using a glitter, I will not use any other brush other than this. If I'm using some kind of glitter primer, I will use this to apply that and then press on the glitter over it. This brush can do so much. I feel like I'm even forgetting something. Oh, nose contour as well. And then use this for the small stripe. Like this will do so much. So if you don't have a multitasker, I promise you're not going to regret that one. It is like, I don't even know how you could cover a blemish with anything other than this. So I'm going to cover some blemishes real quick. Again, this is my color corrector. Okay, so again, hyperpigmentation, any like small spots, broken capillaries, again, this brush. So we're at the pressing stage. I pressed on a little bit more and now I'm fully color corrected. Let's move on to the main highlight shade and what I recommend for that. Okay, so we've moved past the buffing stage. Now we're at the pressing stage. Which brushes will actually press on your main shade the best? Obviously, you guys know my favorite, and that is the blush bronzer. Okay, this is what I use on the daily if I want anything. I would say it's kind of like the middle of the road. It's the best for that medium coverage, okay? Now you can use it and get light coverage or full coverage. That is more dependent on how much of your main highlight you are applying, okay? So it has less to do with the motion of the brush because you're gonna use the brush the same way. But like for me, for example, like I didn't place any color corrector along my jawline. I'm just going to tap and then I can still buff to get the most natural finish along my jaw. But if I wanted that more medium coverage, guess what? I would just press it on, okay? So again, the motion of the brush is everything. And the reason this brush works so well is because it presses on so well over your color corrector. So where I used my color corrector here, I can tone down that warmth, even it out, and kind of build up that coverage without moving the color I just placed. Because if I move it, it just creates a new color. I lose coverage there, and I'm not gonna be matching. Another option would be the blend brush. Now, this is the brush I grab for those days that I want the most skin-like look, the most natural finish. If I don't want to look like I'm wearing makeup, I will use this. Now, it is a little bit trickier if you're using color corrector over a larger area of your face. Again, down here where I don't use anything, I can still just kind of tap on. And then small circles. Now, again, you're not doing much pressure with this brush because you're just using the very tip of it, like that feather-like motion to just kind of distribute that color. So you get just barely a wash of coverage there because it doesn't take much with these creams. You guys know that. So the harder part where it gets into like where you've already color corrected, you can't do that same motion because then again, you're mixing, you're moving, all of that. So you would have to use this brush and gently kind of almost like tap and feather, which when I say that is kind of gently touching the skin, and this is like the feather motion, okay? I kind of just try to kind of like press it over, and you'll notice it doesn't really change the color much. I'm slowly kind of building up coverage, but you can still really see my skin through it. That is how I get the most natural finish, okay? And that way I can still use that other end on those areas that I need to press on a little bit more, because like my nose is naturally just darkest. So here where I need more coverage, you can really just kind of use that small end to press on more coverage where you need it. Because again, this end I feel like does press on color really easily. Same goes for under the eyes. You can kind of tap there. You're gonna kind of tone down any warmth, but you're not gonna really be building up much coverage unless you go in with this more detailed brush. It is much denser, it picks up a little bit more, and you can pinpoint exactly where you need it. The 30-second brush, again, I still would not recommend this side. This side, I really kind of didn't get into very much because I have a love-hate relationship with this brush because I have so many clients that have issues with it. So I just did a very in-depth get ready with me showing how to use just this brush for your full face over on Instagram. So I will tag that down below. But it's because this brush does not buff whatsoever with this end. This is a very awkward end, and it leads to streaking because more or less people swipe in with this product than they swipe on. They're using way too much. They're wondering why they're not getting any coverage, and it's mostly due to this end. Like I showed you before, this end is a little bit different, obviously, than this, but it can be used in the same way. So you can still press this on and get a nice medium coverage with this brush. I would just say it takes a little bit longer for application. If you're wanting only one brush, you can get a full face with this brush really easily. It's just all in how you use it. So you would buff on your color corrector with this end, then you would press it on, then you would use this end to contour, and then I'll show you how you can use this end to brighten in a minute. So I mentioned this brush earlier. The detail brush is not the best for pressing on. It really does feel a little pokey when you do it this way. I don't recommend it. So I don't recommend this for this stage in the process. You can, again, use this end for more detail pressing on. I don't like this brush for pressing at all. All right, that takes us to this brush, powder brush. The powder brush is most like the buff brush, this end, the powder end. This end you could press on. I feel like this brush is so wide that it's hard to even dip in one color. I'll be honest, I never use this end. I never use it. Now, I just don't feel like it evenly distributes. I feel like it's almost too soft for highlight. I still would probably stick to blush with this. So this end I have used for a full face of highlight before. It gives super full coverage, and it can be a little bit difficult to use because you almost have to kind of press and flick. Now, it's the same motion that you would use with the buff brush. So a lot of people really love this brush. I still use this brush every single day, but I don't recommend it unless you are experienced with this makeup. You know how much of your highlight shades to apply in order to get the coverage you want, and again, like not be too heavy-handed, not apply too much corrector, all of those things. And you are wanting full coverage, okay? This is a full coverage brush, in my opinion. It is extremely dense, picks up a lot of product. And again, it doesn't buff much. Look at how much just got dabbed right in the middle of my forehead, okay? Now, when you're using this brush, I recommend to distribute it. You're really pressing and flicking, okay? It is more of a brush you press on. It is a more time-consuming brush, in my opinion, because you're really having to press on the same area multiple times to get it to kind of blend out and not be just swiping and moving everything around. I don't recommend swiping with this brush because, again, it's going to lead to streaking because it's just so dense. But you can see it will give a lot of coverage, okay? It is much more of a full coverage type brush. I'll show you my favorite way to use it in a minute. So I did this side with the blend brush. I'm going to show you the blush end over here and finish this side. And again, I am just kind of pressing this step, kind of almost just bouncing it across the skin so that it's still getting evenly distributed, but I'm not moving my corrector at all. Now, I can go all the way up to the lash line, and I normally do use just this brush. Okay, so if you can kind of tell the difference in finish, you can tell I've got more coverage on this side. This will give me more of that medium coverage look. Again, if I wanted even more coverage, you could always just keep applying a little bit more. You always want to build this makeup in thin layers. One thick layer will not give you better coverage than thin layers with a corrector of some sort. But that's why I always say this brush, you can get anything from natural to full coverage on. It's just the motion of the brush, however you're going to use it, buff or press on. Now we are officially to the contour step. And I'll be honest, you can contour with pretty much every single one of these brushes. It's just a matter of personal preference. Y'all know my favorite, and that is only because of the ease of it. And I get DMs daily saying, you're right, the detail brush is a game changer. And it's just because of how much easier this brush makes it to apply and blend at the same time. I feel like you get less blending it away or not being able to see it at all, or even blending, splotchiness, those kind of things. I feel like those issues are much less an issue of brush choice and are more an issue of how you are getting your contour on your brush, in my opinion. After doing this for years, I notice it's all about dipping in, okay? Because it doesn't matter what brush you're using, if you are swiping into it, you're gonna get an uneven distribution on your brush, which means you're gonna get darker spots and lighter areas, and you're gonna have to really work at blending those out to make it look uniform and to fade naturally, all of those things. And it really all comes down to how are you getting your product on the brush. Even doing it straight on the face, I feel like is much harder to blend out and make it look good. It takes much longer to blend. You might be saving like time in getting it on your brush or pressing it on the face, but you're taking longer to blend it out. So to me, when it's harder to blend, that is the hardest part, is blending. So if you can make that part easier, then it's gonna you're gonna get better at your contour every time you do it. Okay, so every brush you can contour with. Okay, I'll show you my ride or die. The original 3D brush is this end. Now this end can be a little wide for a lot of people's faces. You guys know I only put my color on half of this brush, even for my face. Unless you have a larger face, then you might have to kind of squish this brush. Okay, squish it, or again, do like I do with the detail and put it on half your brush. Okay, so this is what I do. I always hold my brush no matter which one I'm using. For the most part, I'm gonna get it on the brush this way. Okay, so at an angle, pounce with some pressure, because our contours are drier than our highlights. So by getting that on half the brush, you're not applying it in that widest stripe. It's going to be much thinner, and you can strategically put that darkness right under your cheekbone and almost kind of cup that cheekbone. And as you're pressing, that top part of the brush has no color on it. So what's that doing is it's going to kind of start blending that for you as you're pressing that on. Do you see that? So the top part of your line is naturally going to get lighter. I totally put a lot on, but that's okay. It's for demo purposes. Okay, and so you can kind of just keep pressing. I've done nothing but press. Okay, and then if it still needs help blending, just flick upwards. The brush can make a huge difference when it comes to how easy it is to blend out as well. So with this brush, I like to just flick upwards. Now, some brushes blend much easier than others. So this 3D brush is much denser, so it makes it even easier to blend out because it's really dense and it blends more. Do you see how much that just blended? I do it the exact same way. I would just, and I just showed this in the video I did, where I get it on half the brush and then I'm just gonna cup that cheekbone, okay? Now, a couple of different ones are gonna be this brush. Yes, you can contour with this brush. Again, this is way too wide, but if you squeeze it and get your color on, you do the same thing. You wanna hold it and squeeze, and then you just press that right under the cheekbone, and then you can do the same thing. Press, blend, flick up, okay? Same exact principles, all right? This brush is a little bit different. I feel like this brush is too wide for 90% of people's faces, but this brush, the small end, which is exactly the same, it's just smaller, you can use in the same ways you could use this brush, okay? And what you do, since it's at that angle, let me just show you, okay? This one I feel like is a little bit hard. You gotta be careful about tapping in. See how it doesn't get evenly distributed, kind of like I was talking about, okay? But then you kind of want to act like you're cupping that cheekbone like along, like you don't want to go like this or like this. Just kind of put it along your cheekbone like it naturally would go. And then I'm just gonna slightly tap along that cheekbone, okay? Now, I still have more on there, which I don't feel like I need. I'm gonna flip it over, and then I'm gonna either press or flick. Now this brush is super dense, so it's really gonna blend that out, okay? So same thing, pressing, flicking if you need to. And I don't like that as much. I feel like I'm very picky when it comes to my own contour after doing it this long. So that's why you never see me use this brush. Again, every brush takes practice, and it will get easier. But I even started contouring with this end, guys. Same thing goes. You just draw on your line. You want to flip it over and then blend. Again, though, it's going to take longer to blend out when you have a harsh line there, as opposed to when you're pressing it on and pressing to blend at the same time. This brush, I'd say, for me personally, is one of my least favorites to contour with. And I think it's because, well, this end I can use and just make a straight line, but this end does not blend out because it is just way too flimsy, and contours are so dry, it just doesn't blend. Those contours are really designed to be drier so that they stay where you put them, so that you have to actually use quite a bit of pressure when it comes to blending these out. When I'm pressing, I'm actually pouncing on my face with some pressure, as opposed to just, you know, gently, like with the tip of the brush. That's not gonna blend out our contour. So I don't like this brush for contour. I'll be honest. You can apply it with this, but I would say pick up another brush that's denser that you can actually blend it out with. Even if you just blend up with this brush, all the other brushes will blend better than this brush, which is kind of ironic because what is this called? The blend brush. What's this called? The buff brush. Obviously, I had no hand in naming these things, right? They didn't ask my opinion. So, moving on, shall we? So when it comes to the cheekbone, I would say those are my favorite for cheekbone contour. The rest of your face, I feel like the brush does not matter as much because you're not having to really control the blend. You're literally just blending up, down, just so you have no harsh lines. This is the only area that you're really gonna have any definition to your contour. So it's the only one that you have to be a little bit more strategic about your blending. So since I still have this on my brush, this one's actually really great along the forehead because you don't have to worry about how wide it is. You can simply press it on, press up into the hairline, okay, and then down the forehead. And this brush just blends really easily, okay? Same thing goes along the jawline. When it comes to detail contouring, that's a different story. I would say these two small ends are your best bet for things like under the lip, to make your lips look bigger. Whew, I got a little bit too much there. And for nose contouring, so I'm gonna break out another brush. One of the brushes I use two of, okay, is the Smudge Brush. I have one for eyes and one for noses. This is probably, if I had to pick one brush to contour my nose, it would be this brush. It makes it so much easier. Now, I told you you could use a multitasker, but you do have to have a more steady hand. This is a very kind of fine line, and this is even finer. And every time I try to do it, yes, it will make your nose thinner than any other possible brush, for sure. But if you don't have if you can't make a straight line, it can make your nose look crooked very easily. So you can easily use this or this, but I find they're almost better to kind of blend and soften out the line than actually drawing the lines because they make them, again, too thick. The key with a nose contour is really making sure that all of your lines are very thin, because a nose contour ultimately is just making your nose appear skinnier. That is the only purpose. It can kind of like alter the look of kind of the shape, but for the most part, that's what we're doing, is we're just creating a shadow of light and dark, highlighting. That's what we're doing, right? So I love this smudge brush for that, because you have one end which is more straight and then one end which is more domed, but it actually comes to a slight point at the top. So I use the straight end to draw my stripes, and then this end for the highlight down the center. So let me show you. Okay, so you can see kind of my messy stripes. It's never been my forte. This is why I use my fingers so often, because getting them straight or even is not my forte. It's okay, you blend it out anyway. All right, so that is all the contour. Now we go to the highlight step. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish out this with this end of the brush, and then I will talk about other brushes for the accent brightener before we then press it all in. Okay, so I got my accent brightener in between. Now let's talk about covering more surface area, because I'm not actually going to use this to brighten my full face. All right, so we're still technically on face brushes. The one thing I do not ever use this brush for is accent brightener. It's much too large. You definitely need more detail and precision. But accent brightener is something that I feel like, especially if you have mature skin, you want to be pressing it on. If you have used a color corrector in any way under your eyes, you can't be sweeping. First of all, you don't want to like move that delicate under eye area. You want to do that at least amount as possible. But again, you want to be pressing on so that you're not moving that color corrector and then letting, you know, your under eyes show through. A lot of times that is simply what people are doing, and that's why you're seeing what you're trying to cover. It's just because you're moving things around too much, okay? So I'm gonna have to clean this brush real quick. We don't want to put contour in our accent brightener. So the best brush cleaner of all time. Stay tuned. I am giving one of those away on Instagram this month as well. You can either do it either way. You can go for detail or covering a large surface area. Okay, so either one of the detail or the blend brushes, I use these all the time for accent brightening. I would say it depends on your under eyes, okay? If you have issues around that area like I do, and you're really trying to keep your triangle of light small, okay, so that you're not emphasizing, and you want to keep it to either, let's say, right here, okay? The accent brightener is something I think less is more. I see so many people putting this bright white right there, and then they're wondering why they look chalky or textured. You can get brightness without going opposite end of the spectrum with lightness, I promise, okay? So I'm taking that all the way up to the nose contour, because the highlight is what does half the work. Okay, now I am just going on the side of my nose because I have darkness there. And then I'm literally just going right here, okay? Now I can control this brush and just press, okay? Without getting into this entire area where I have texture. Now, one of the trends right now is to also brighten out here. You can totally do that as well, especially once you do your eyeshadow. It's really nice to be able to clean that line up and make sure you have kind of that lift going on, especially if you have mature eyes like I do. If you have a lot of texture there, you might want to skip that. Sometimes I do. I feel like it does kind of emphasize that. But I like to press on my brightener also to give me an extra layer of coverage where I have hyperpigmentation and shadow. So a lot of times people aren't even trying to cover under eye darkness. It's just the contours of their under eyes, and you feel like you have bags and all those things. That is all in placement of your brightener. So wherever the deepest part of your shadow is, that is where you want to brighten. So my under eyes are very different. Both of them are not the same. So on this side, I have a shadow right there that I have to hit with my brightener. So I sometimes use this smaller brush to kind of bring that out. Anywhere you put a brightener, you are going to bring that forward. Anywhere you put something dark, like a contour, you're pushing that and receding it. You can trick the eye to making it look like the contours of your face are slightly different. That's all we're doing with highlight and contour, right? Okay, so on this side, there, I strategically placed, I'm still bright right here. You want to kind of keep that triangle right there. So if you're trying to be strategic, I would say stick with that smaller brush for your brightener. If not, my favorite two probably would be this one or the small end of the Buff brush. Now I can tell you, for years, I use this end of the 3D brush, but it's not everyone's favorite, okay? And the reason why is because it picks up so much product, you have to be careful. But if you just simply kind of tap in, it does get in this inner eye corner really well, okay? The key is pressing with this brush, not pulling, just tapping, okay? And you can see how much, I don't know if you can see how much product that picked up, okay? Same thing, and then you just kind of press it on where you want. I do the same technique with this small end of the Buff brush. I just feel like it isn't quite so large, but you can tell like how much that picked up versus that. And I already applied this, and I haven't even applied this. Like, this picks up so much product. So if you have issues with your under eyes creasing, I would say steer clear of this brush. You want to really control it. This is going to pick up less. This one might be a good option because you can kind of tap it out and distribute it really easily because it kind of fits that contour of the eye really nicely. I like it because, again, I got hyperpigmentation here as well, and I can kind of give myself extra coverage just by tapping. Okay. Also, when it comes to the rest of your face that you're brightening, a lot of times people have issues with texture here. Sometimes that is just applying too much of their brightener and using, like, you could totally just use a small brush like this and keep it really light-handed, or you can use a brush like this, but you really want to press it in. And I'm actually using quite a bit of pressure to press that on. Okay, so another place sometimes we use our accent brightener is along the jawline, and I always recommend this if your neck is naturally lighter. I usually go back to this brush just because it kind of fits the jawline really well. If you do need to kind of, you can easily carve out your contour if you get a little wonky with blending, or you want to make it more defined, or you want to bring in those lighter tones. But you can use any brush in that region that kind of fits. I would just use a bigger brush and something you can press on. Okay, because I'm talking too much per usual, let's go ahead and I'm going to use this. As always, I'm going to pounce it all over the skin, get it back to a skin-like finish because I definitely don't have it right now, and remove excess. So if you have issues with creasing or feeling like your face is sticky or tacky, and you've like switched down to the brushes that you can really get lighter coverage on, and you're not using this, that is your only issue. This will save the day. I don't recommend layering shades without it, so get yourself a Perfector. All right, so you can kind of tell now really how skin-like this side is and how much more full coverage this side is. The difference in brush choice, right? And the motion of the brush. I'm gonna keep saying that. All right, so we've gotten to the eye just perfected, so I'm going to set my under eyes with powder. Okay, I don't recommend using the same brush you dip in your creams to dip in your powder. First of all, you're gonna get a layer over your powder and it's almost gonna be like it's dried up, and you'll have to use like spoolie to brush off that cream that gets stuck to the top. We don't want that. You're just gonna waste product. So this is why I always just use this brush for powder, but a great alternative is the large end of the Buff brush, which I think I used. So I'm gonna wash it real quick. Good thing it dries in 30 seconds. Easy peasy. Okay, so this is designed for powder, and I love it because it does fit that area perfectly. It doesn't pick up too much powder, which we know if you use too much powder under the eyes, that's the first thing that's gonna cause cakiness and aging us. But this brush is very similar, okay, with that angle, and it's also just as dense. They're very similar, they're just the shape is slightly different. But if you use this for under your eyes and you don't want a separate brush just for that, just reserve this side for your powder and press it on the same way. So with our vanilla dust, I simply touch it, I never swipe it, and then I'm just gonna tap it on where I need to set. Same thing goes with this brush, touch, and then press it on, okay? And that way my under eyes are locked and loaded. They're not going anywhere, and I'm not gonna have any creasing or any issues throughout the day. Now, above my eyes, my eyelids, I do swipe, and I'm generous with that because I have oily eyelids. Another option is using that Perfector, same way. You just have to be really careful using that for under your eyes because it can pick up a lot as well. So I do see a lot of people use this brush for powder as well. If you like a light dusting, I feel like, yes, traditionally a lot of people use big fluffy brushes for powder. I don't feel like it's the best method to set under eyes or give you a fully matte look or really keep oil at bay. That's why this brush is designed at this angle so that when you press it into the pores of your skin, you're really gonna hold in that oil and give you more of a matte finish. If you're wanting just, so I don't know, maybe you still feel a little tacky or you're not quite used to creams or something like that, and you kind of just want to brush a little bit of powder, maybe you like the powdery look, you could use that for powder. I just wouldn't use the same brush that you use for Bella bronzer. So I'm not going to skip bronzer because it's one of my favorite things, but I'm just going to put on a little because I don't feel like I need too much. But the blush bronzer brush, this end is designed for our cream bronzer. And I'll be honest, the first time I ever used this makeup, I'm like, but that is not a dense brush. And you're telling me to use it with a cream? That doesn't make sense. But it works. It's all in the motion of the brush. So I love, this is Bella, this is Glow Illuminator, and this is Heat Wave, our newest bronzer in the family. And it's, when they're brand new, be careful because they are very soft. But as you have them in your compact and you're constantly opening and closing, they will dry out over time. So I just kind of swirl This one is still pretty new, so I barely dab into that because I know otherwise I'm gonna get too much. So just be forewarned. So I like to gradually build my bronzer. Okay, I've already highlighted, so I'm gonna skip the center of my face. Okay, and then I tap anywhere I kind of color corrected or, you know, so I'm not moving. But this brush actually is really awesome because it gives a very light application, especially if you do have a lighter neck, you can easily pull it down the neck, but it's buildable. So you can get as bronzed as you like. The only other brush I've used for bronzer is the blush end, and that's when I'm using bronzer more as a base. Like my self tanner is worn off. I know I'm not going to be matching the rest of myself because my face is so fair. Then I will use that as a base under my highlight. It gives kind of like that inner warmth and glow to the skin. It's a fun trick to try. I would say you could use anything that you buff on. Any of those brushes I talked about, the buffing motion, you can use for that Bella as a base. Okay, we're finally to blush. So again, I've used a color corrector. I have all these just where I want them. I don't want to move it. So I know a lot of people will kind of tap in and place their blush and then they take their brush and they blend it out like that. But what's that going to do? It's going to move all of that coverage I just placed. So I never buff on blush. So this is why I like to choose a brush that will actually press it on and kind of blend it at the same time without getting like too much of a concentration in one spot that I would have to then, the only way to blend it would be that buffing motion. I don't want to buff now. Like I want to press. Once I'm done with that color corrector step, I don't buff again. I just press, okay? So obviously my favorite brush. I keep one for highlight, one for blush, okay? So what should we do today? Let's see. Let's do nude. Okay, so I'm gonna just tap it on right along the contour. So it goes contour, blush should be connected, apples of the cheeks, away from the nose. Okay, so once you place, look how easily that goes on. Okay, I'm barely tapping and I'm not doing any blending of any kind. And then you can build by just kind of tapping in one more time. Just don't get too much on your brush at one time, because as soon as you press to the face, most of it's gonna go right to that spot. Okay, same thing goes with any other brush you choose. So this brush with the 3D works well, but like I said before, it's kind of almost has this like tip to it. So it will distribute more product in one spot. So you got to be careful and really it takes a lot more like tapping out to get that to blend. This brush. So like I showed you before, I'm going to kind of squeeze it a little so I don't get it in the surrounding colors. I would say one of the hardest things, if you get divots in your creams, this is a very flat brush. So getting an even distribution, if your creams are not flat, is the hardest part. But it taps on super easy and it's a perfect size. Next two brushes, I would say it's okay. This one, I feel like does pick up a lot of product. You have to, again, tap it a lot more to kind of blend it out. This end is too small. This end is not my favorite for pressing, like I told you before. A lot of people love this for blush. And I feel like it does get a very light application of blush. I do feel like this brush works best for the matte, the more satin formulations that aren't glossy, which I feel like doesn't distribute the glossy ones very well. It's almost like they're a little too sticky for this type of brush, like it's too loose, in my opinion. I don't, and again, I'd have to kind of sweep it, which is not the way I like to apply my blush. So that is why I tend to stick with this one. It is perfect for blush. And then I can easily dip into another color and build it up. What should I'm gonna apply, I'm gonna cheat. Go with a limited edition shade. Oh, I love this color. This is Love Spell, which, hint, hint, I might be giving away one. Okay, last but not least, Illuminator. Now, I always use my Perfector and I swipe in generously and then I can just press it right on, be good to go. I know a lot of people like to use their fingers. I feel like I always have fingerprints when I do that. So I don't tend to ever do that because it bothers me if it's not fully blended. But I can't go without talking about at least the powders as well. And like I said, this was originally designed for our powder illuminators. So if you don't know, our powder illuminators are much more of a wet looking highlight and they are super shimmery. So always kind of just barely tap in. Oh no, part of my Photoshop just broke all over my chair. Tap off excess and then you just barely have to touch. Look at that. Wowza. Okay. Okay, so you can tell that the creams are a little bit more natural. The powders are a lot more of that wet. Yep, just got that all over my white chair. I had planned on also going over all the eye brushes, but surprise, surprise, I talked too long. And 10 brushes is a lot to show all application options, right? Okay, so I'm going to finish up my face and let's just do the eye brushes in another video. I'm already planning a giveaway with eyes and all 4 of the brushes that I'm giving away anyway. So in that video, I will show you ways to use these. I can do the rest in that video. So we're just gonna call it. I'm going to finish up my face and I will be back with eyes, another giveaway, and I will show you guys how to use the eyeshadow brushes in multiple ways. But I already showed you nose contour, talked about lips. I'm sure as soon as I get off here, I'm gonna remember another way that I forgot to share with you guys, but hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you learned a new tip or trick that you can use with your face brushes, or maybe a new way that you'd never thought of before, or a new motion. If you're needing help with your Seint 3D makeup, I am here to help. There is a color request link in the drop box below the video. Just hit that little arrow, it'll open up. You can shoot me your selfie, tell me how you like to wear your makeup, and I can help you with application tips and tricks and all of the things. Make sure you have those proper shades. That is numero uno when it comes to getting the best from your Seint makeup. Don't forget to go follow me over on Instagram for the rest of the month's giveaways and go comment below to enter today's. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments below as well. And as always, thank you guys so much for being here. Love you.